Waiting rooms allow hosts to hold all meeting participants in a separate area until they have reviewed them and are ready to safely let them in. From your Zoom web portal, click Settings, then Security. First, click to toggle on waiting rooms if you wish to add a waiting room to every meeting you start, including instant meetings. Note that you can also add a waiting room when scheduling any individual meeting. If this or any other security option is grayed out, it has been locked by your account administrator. Next, click Edit Options to select who will go into waiting rooms. Everyone, those outside your account, and a few other choices. Here, you'll also select who can admit participants into the meeting from a waiting room. Click Continue. Next to this, users on a paid plan will see the option to customize their waiting room. This includes the title or message and optionally adding a logo, image, or video that meets size requirements. From here, proceed with scheduling a meeting and inviting participants as you normally would. Once configured, when the host starts the meeting, the waiting room is automatically started too. You'll see a notification banner at the top of your screen as participants enter the waiting room, and can also click the participants icon to see an up-to-date list view. As long as permitted in your waiting room settings, you and any co-host can admit participants one by one or all at once. If it is an unwanted guest, click Remove to drop them from the meeting. Hosts may also send chat messages to everyone in the waiting room. Click the chat icon, then select Everyone in Waiting Room from the drop-down menu. Chat messages will appear next to the holding message. The host or co-host may also send individual participants to the waiting room after the meeting starts. If they haven't already enabled the feature, hosts may do so by clicking the security icon and then Enable Waiting Room. Or Participants, then More, and Enable Waiting Room. Next, click More next to any participant's name and choose Put in Waiting Room. You will be able to admit or remove them as before. Well, looks like my meeting is about to start. Bye for now.
Good morning. I mean, good, not good morning for you, Marianne. Good afternoon. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see. I guess I can unmute you. You know, I would.
Hi, Martha.
Oh, good. Listen, I need your help. I'm having a little trouble sharing my screen.
Okay.
And I would love your help. I have my PowerPoint set up, ready to go, but I don't know how to get it so you all can see it.
So when you go on and share screen, what happens?
So I'm clicking and I see desktop, whiteboard, whatever, but there's an exclamation point for desktop 1. And I push share maybe. Allow Zoom to share.
Do you want to test it while it's just the two of us?
And now there's Jonathan. But you're not seeing anything, are you? I don't have the green thing around it.
No. And I'm just looking and I'm not allowed to share. You could give me the right and I would be happy to just, if you want to send me your PowerPoint and I can share it, but you would need to allow me to share.
But then you would have to advance the slides for me, right?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Well, it's a problem for me because I'm kind of going through the slides real quick like. So let me just see.
If your PowerPoint is on the same screen as the Zoom, like not an external monitor.
It's external. Well, it's on the same screen, yes.
Okay.
When I click on share screen, one participant can share at a time, advanced sharing options. One participant who can share all participants. Oh dear. I mean, I don't know, maybe I do send it to you and I guess you do it. I just, that's so not, it's gonna, but thank you for offering that. Let me see. Okay, so Marianne, if you could just tell me quickly your email, which I should have, oh, here it is, M. Potvin. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to attach my slides. And they're called Relentless Hope. Okay, good. Okay. And please tell me when you get them. I'm sending them right now. And now I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay.
And admit. I'm not doing too well here.
You're okay.
Yeah, did you get it?
Not yet.
All right, and let me make you co-host. More. Make host. I'm just going to make you a host at this point. So you're the host. And do you have them yet?
Not yet. I'm refreshing. Did you send them to my alliance? Yeah, I mean that's the email you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get people in from the waiting room. I have Valeria. I don't see her, but I'm thinking about her. I got my eye on you, Valeria. All right, but let's see. Oh, good. There you are. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble here, so I'm a little preoccupied. Thank you for
quite all right.
bearing with me. Okay, do you have them yet? Oh, good. Marianne, you have them?
No, not yet.
Well, let me send it again.
I can admit people. Would you like me to start admitting people?
Yes,
while we wait?
yes, please admit people. Thank you. Oh, Peter Young. Oh, good. And iPad. Let's see.
I have them, Martha. I've received
okay,
them.
Good. So to the first screen, please. All right.
Okay.
So you'll have to, I'll just keep saying next, Marianne, and you'll know
Yeah,
Yeah.
give me a moment to open to
Yeah, why don't you
download
show
them.
them, and let's see how that works.
Yeah.
Thank you all for bearing with us, with me. I'm struggling a little bit here with the PowerPoint technology.
I'm going to go on mute, Martha, because there's a lot of helicopters in my area for some reason.
I guess, oh, good, there, okay, can we just share the actual screen? This way, I guess we can see what's next. No. You know, I'm okay with, I guess this way I'll be able to see what's next. We'll keep it like this, I guess. Now, can people, oh, there you go. Oh, heavens. Now, can I, but I'm not, can you put me back to being host and I still have this or not really?
So no, I'm gonna need, it's on my screen, so I'm
It's
gonna
your
need
screen,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you're the one.
yeah.
Okay, okay. It's actually so cool. I can see what the next slide is. All right, now people like Peter, if you could, and Valeria, can you see the one slide in front there, grieving the lost? You see just the one slide?
Yes.
Yes.
And you don't see other stuff, just the one?
Underneath, I can see the,
Oh, yeah, the whole show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but can't really read them.
Okay. Oh, there. Now, okay. Now you can
Yes,
only
that
see,
looks-
all of us can only see
that's
one.
exactly.
All right. Me too, but that's fine. Well, yeah, I think, you know, Marianne, I think I'd like to be able to see what's coming next. So if people don't mind just focusing on the center one.
Sure.
All right. And so I just, yeah, like that. Okay. So you all can see down below, but just focus on the center, please.
That's fine. Can't
Okay.
read the bottom anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're very sweet, all of you. And so, Marianne, we thank her. She is helping me out here. And Jonathan is back here. So oh, and is it true, Marianne, can you make me co-host?
I made you co-host, Martha, and then we lost the slide, I believe.
Oh, then forget about my being co-host. We'll just go back to you're the host.
Yes, so you have to host.
That's
me.
okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And you'll just hear me say next, and you'll
Absolutely.
they go
That's
pretty
fine.
quickly. So
Yeah.
let's see, iPad 3. Now, does that mean 3 people? Or does that just mean 1 person? Anyway, so hello, iPad 3. Laurie, oh good, Laurie's here and Libby's here. Oh good, now can I admit them? I can admit them, I did. Libby and Laurie. Hello, Libby and Laurie. Oh good, I know you're all muted. Marianne is helping me out here and you're trying to get the slides back up as the host.
You have to make me the host again, Martha, so that I can do that again.
Oh, I do. Oh,
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
If you go into participant, the same way you did it before. So if you go to participant and my name, and if you go hover over my name, you'll see mute and more.
Yes.
And then on more, you should be able to say make host.
Make host. Okay, good. You're host. Change host again.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And hello, Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. So Laurie again. Hello, Laurie again. From before, from times in the past. Okay. All right. Well, once we get the slide going, okay, good. So folks, please just look at the one in the middle. That's a relevant one. Anyway, why don't we get started? And I want to thank you all for being here. Oh, there's Livy. Hello there. I thank you all for being here. And we have an action-packed 45 minutes. And Marianne has agreed to be the host and to advance the slides. Grieving the loss of relentless hope and evolving towards acceptance next. So, yeah. So two of my favorite concepts are optimal stress. In other words, not all stress is bad, and relentless hope. Not all hope is good. And so anyway, but today we're going to be talking about realistic hope. That's the not so good one. The good one is realistic hope, but we get to that by way of grieving next. Okay, so this is the overview. Relentless hope as a defense against grieving the reality of the object's limitations, separateness, and immutability. Fairbairn's seductive, in other words, exciting, rejecting object as an explanation for the ambivalence of the patient's attachment to the bad object and the adhesiveness of that attachment. Then, and thank you, Marianne, for letting people in from the waiting room. Optimally stressful, growth incentivizing disillusionment statements to facilitate the grieving of disillusionment and the loss of illusions, relentless hope about the object of one's desire. Grieving as taking ownership of both heartbreak, devastation, and rage, fury, anger. Adaptive internalizations as a result of grieving, whereby whatever good the object had offered will be internalized, taken in. And ultimately, evolution of the patient through healing cycles of disruption and repair to sober, mature acceptance of the harsh reality that it was what it was and is what it is, but also some appreciation for the good that there is and has been next. Pretending that it can be when it can't is how people break their hearts. And the wonderful words of Elvin Semrad. Next, relentless hope is a defense to which the patient clings in order not to have to feel the pain of her disappointment in the object. The hope, a defense ultimately against grieving. And I'm going to be talking about relentless hope as the refusal to grieve, not the inability to grieve. So I think that people, all people, have somewhere the capacity to grieve, but there may well be things that get in the way of their allowing themselves to go there. So, and I'm also all about empowerment of the patient, no matter what their history, no matter how many traumas, whatever, it's their refusal to grieve. And if indeed, ultimately, we can facilitate their grieving through these iterative healing cycles of disruption and repair, I'll be saying more about this over the course of our time, then ultimately they will be able to internalize all sorts of good stuff and in the process no longer be relentlessly hoping that the object will be providing in ways that the object is not going to be providing. Next. So the patient's refusal to deal with the pain of her grief about the object fuels the relentlessness with which she pursues it. Both the relentlessness of her hope, think libido, that she might yet be able to make the object over into what she would want it to be, and the relentlessness of the outrage, think aggression, she experiences in those moments of dawning recognition that, despite her best efforts and most fervent desire, she might never be able to make that actually happen. Now, let me say I distinguish between outrage and rage. So outrage here, I'm intending to suggest a sense of outraged entitlement and how dare the object not be delivering, whereas rage is a little more sort of pure rage. Next, please. So next, please. Okay. Equally importantly, what fuels the relentlessness of the patient's pursuit is the fact that the object is outside the sphere of her omnipotence, think Winnicott, and is therefore unable to be either possessed or controlled. Indeed, underlying the patient's relentless pursuit is an illusion that she has omnipotent control over the object of her desire. An illusion often accompanied by an entitled sense that something is her due. Next, please. And I hope people have been let in from the waiting room. Paradoxically, such patients are never relentless in their pursuit of good objects. Instead, their relentless pursuit is of the bad object. In other words, it's never enough that the patient simply find a new good object to compensate for how bad the old one had been. You would think that that's what they would do. But no. Rather, the compelling need becomes first to create, or actually more accurately, to recreate the old bad object, and then to pressure, manipulate, prod, force, coerce this old bad object to change. So, for example, a patient whose parent, his father, alcoholic, she chooses, you would think, well, she chooses someone who's not an alcoholic, but no. Under the sway of her repetition compulsion, she will find herself, defensively find herself, choosing a man who, quite frankly, either is already alcoholic or with some uncanny intuition is about to become alcoholic, so that she can then force the old bad object to change, symbolically then correcting for the early on situation. Next, please. So a popular song that speaks directly to this issue of the patient's relentless need to recreate the early on traumatic failure situation is a rock song by the late Warren Zevon entitled, "If You Won't Leave Me, I'll Find Somebody Who Will." Next, please. The patient can refine the old bad object in any one of three ways. So she can choose a good object and then experience it as bad, projection. She can choose a good object and then exert, in the words of Thomas Ogden and others, interpersonal pressure on it to become bad, projective identification. Or she can simply cut to the chase and choose a bad object to begin with. Next, please. There you go. That's the bad object. Next, please. Again, choosing a good object is not a viable option. A good object simply will not satisfy. Rather, the patient's need, fueled by her repetition compulsion, or it's more, I would have said, her compulsive and unwitting reenactments. So what she's actually playing out on the stage of her life will be to re-encounter the old bad object and then to compel this bad object to become good. And I hope you can sort of hear the sort of relentlessness here in the patient's pursuit, which will then symbolically correct for the unmastered relational traumas that the patient had experienced early on at the hands of the infantile object. Next, please. Again, the patient's refusal to deal with the pain of her grief about the object and the fact that it cannot be controlled fuels the relentlessness with which she pursues it. Both the relentlessness of her entitled sense that something is her due and the relentlessness of her outrage, I think sort of narcissistic outrage, of her outrage in the face of its being denied. Hoping against hope, she pursues the object of her desire with a vengeance, refusing to relent, refusing to accept, refusing to forgive. Next, please, and the next. And interestingly, this isn't really just about, our patients have this, but all of us on some level are relentless in our pursuit of something that a panel of 10,000 objective judges would have said, forget it, it's not going to happen. And yet the person desperate to be able to get the object to be forthcoming will be relentless in her pursuit, even so. All right, so it's to Fairbairn that we're going to turn. It took me decades to understand what Fairbairn was understanding and what Fairbairn was saying. And I read Guntrip and then Fairbairn and Guntrip and Fairbairn. And finally, I think I sort of got something here. So this is my synopsis here. Fairbairn's intense attachments. Said Fairbairn, as we know, a bad object is infinitely better than no object at all. And this is going to be totally relevant for the relentless hope and the relentless outrage. As we will see, the masochistic relentless hope and the sadistic relentless outrage. But I'm leaping ahead. So, said Fairbairn, a bad object is infinitely better than no object at all, which accounts in large part for the relentlessness with which patients pursue the unattainable. Both the relentlessness of their unrealistic hope and entitled sense that something is their due, and the relentlessness of their unwavering outrage in the face of its being denied. Now, let me say, patients, next please, patients are never relentless in their pursuit of something that obviously can't be. They don't get relentless in their wanting you to be a different height or a different gender or something that's just we all know could never be, but rather they would be relentless in their pursuit of something that technically you could provide. For example, answers or maybe hugs. A previous therapist had hugged. You don't, but they are relentless in their pursuit of that hug from you. So that's what makes it so tricky, because technically, why can't they be a friend? Why can't they be your friend once the therapy's over? Why can't they be a friend now? Why can't they do lunch? I mean, technically they could, except, well, we don't do those things. So that's part of what's confusing for them. Many theorists have written about internal bad objects to which the patient is fiercely attached, but few have addressed, until Fairbairn, the critical issue of what exactly fuels these intense attachments. So it's to Fairbairn that we must look to understand the specific nature of the patient's intense attachments to her internal bad objects, attachments that make it difficult for her to separate from them, which she must do if she is ever to extricate herself from her relentless pursuits and her compulsive and unwitting reenactments. Next, please. So how are bad experiences at the hands of the infantile object internally recorded and structuralized? Fairbairn writes, when a child's need for contact is frustrated by the parent, the child deals with her frustration by defensively interjecting the bad parent. I think of a Fairbairnian dustbuster, suck in the bad. And again, in the literature, a distinction is sometimes made between you interject bad, as in pathogenic interjects, but you internalize good, as in adaptive internalizations. So anyway, says Fairbairn, when the child, to deal with her frustration, defensively interjects the bad parent, it is as if the child finds it intolerably painful to be disappointed by the parent. And so the child, to protect herself against the pain of having to know just how bad the parent really is. In other words, it's defensive, interjects the parent's badness in the form of an internal bad object or pathogenic interject. Basically, in the words of Fairbairn, the child takes the burden of the parent's badness upon herself in order not to have to feel the pain of her grief. Next. Defensive interjection of the parent's badness happens all the time in situations of abuse. The patient will recount episodes of outrageous abuse at the hands of a parent and then report that she feels, not angry at her parent, but guilty. After all, it's easier to experience herself as unworthy than to allow herself to know the horrid truth about her parent as having been abusive. In other words, it's easier to experience herself as bad and as having deserved the abuse, for having somehow provoked it, for having gotten in the way, for having had too many needs, for having been too difficult, or even for having been born, than to confront the intolerably painful reality that the parent should never have done what she did. Next, please. More generally, a child whose heart has been broken by her parent will defend herself against the pain of her disappointment by taking on the parent's badness as her own. Thereby, and thus all the feelings of, I hate myself, I'm a horrible person, et cetera, et cetera. She has introjected the parent's badness, and ultimately the therapeutic action will need to have it that this badness gets put back out there and reworked. Okay, so defend herself against the pain of her disappointment by taking on the parent's badness as her own, thereby enabling her, this is how it works for her, to preserve the illusion of her parent as good and as ultimately forthcoming if she, the child, could but get it right. In essence, by defensively introjecting the bad parent, the child is able strategically to maintain an attachment to her actual parent, and as a result is able to hold on to her unrelenting hope and illusion that perhaps someday, somehow, some way, were she to be but good enough, try hard enough, suffer deeply enough, she might yet be able to compel her parent to change. Next, please. Again, as Fairbairn writes, a relationship with a bad object is infinitely better than no relationship at all. Because although the object is bad, the child can at least still relentlessly hope that the object might someday become good. Next, please. But what does Fairbairn suggest is the specific nature of the child's intense attachment to this internal bad object? According to Fairbairn, a bad parent is a parent who frustrates her child's longing for contact. But, Fairbairn writes, a seductive parent who first says yes and then says no is a very bad parent. Fairbairn's interest is in these very bad parents, these seductive parents. Therefore, when the child has been failed by a parent who is seductive, the child, as her first line of defense, will introject this exciting but ultimately rejecting parent next. Splitting is the second line of defense. Once the bad object is inside, it's split into two parts, different from Kernberg's splitting that characterizes borderlines. Different, you'll see in a second. The exciting object that offers the enticing promise of a special relationship, and the rejecting object that ultimately fails to deliver. Two questions for you. Is the rejecting, depriving object a good object or a bad object? Yeah, you got that one right. It's a bad object. The second one, is the exciting, enticing object a good object or a bad object? Bad object also. Bad object also. And this is where so different from Kernberg. Kernberg has a good object that is libidinally cathected and a bad object that is aggressively cathected, whereas Fairbairn has the bad object split into exciting and rejecting, libidinal for one, rejecting, anti-libidinal for the other, attaching to the bad object. So thank you here. Splitting of the ego goes hand in, and I hope everybody's in from the waiting room. Splitting of the ego goes hand in hand with splitting of the object. Now, please note that Fairbairn does not conceive of the id as separate from the ego. Rather, he posits the existence of an ego that has not only internal objects, but also its own reservoir of energy. In other words, both libido and aggression. So Fairbairn's ego, not Freud's, but Fairbairn's ego, is a dynamic structure, a structure with its own energy, objects and energy. So Fairbairn's libidinal ego, just visually, Fairbairn's libidinal ego, libido, attaches itself to the exciting object and longs for contact, hoping against hope that the object will be forthcoming. Relentless hope, relentless hope. Fairbairn's anti-libidinal ego, or aggressive ego, which is a repository for all the hatred and destructiveness that have accumulated as a result of the frustrated longing, attaches itself to the rejecting object and rages against it. Next, please. So what then is the specific nature of the patient's intense attachment to the bad object? It is, of course, ambivalent. It is both libidinal and anti-libidinal, or aggressive in nature. The bad object is both loved because it excites, which is why it is libidinally cathected, and hated because it rejects, which is why it is aggressively cathected. Next, please. In any event, the third line of defense is repression, unconscious repression of the ego's attachment to the exciting, rejecting object. According to Fairbairn, then, at the core of the repressed is not an impulse, not a trauma, not a memory, but a forbidden relationship, an intensely conflicted relationship with a bad object that is both loved and hated. Over time, this ambivalent attachment to the internal object will be compulsively reenacted on the stage of the patient's life, such that she will find herself reacting to the external objects of her desire with both longing and aversion. Although because the attachment is repressed, the patient might be unaware that both sides exist. Next, please. What this means clinically is that patients who are relentless in their pursuit of the bad, exciting, rejecting object must ultimately acknowledge both their intense hunger for the object and their outraged hatred of the object, because it fills them repeatedly. And some people are very much in touch with yearning and longing and not at all in touch with the rage, the outrage. And others are just hating, but not acknowledging and not in touch with their yearning and the longing. And ultimately, they need to be acknowledging both sides, two parts, both and. It was therefore, so concluding here, it was therefore to Fairbairn that we turned in order better to appreciate that the intensity of the patient's attachment to the bad object is fueled by ambivalence. Next, please. And next, please, after this. So now, although Fairbairn's claim is that he's writing about schizoid personalities, I mean, that's his thing, and he gets to, because that's what he says, it's schizoid personalities. I believe that because he's talking about intense attachments to the internal object, but then, of course, those get projected and played out and reenacted on the stage of one's life. So I believe that the manner in which Fairbairn conceptualizes what he calls the endopsychic situation of these so-called schizoid personalities captures in a nutshell the psychodynamics of sadomasochistic patients. In fact, my contention will be that the patient's relentless pursuit of the bad object has both masochistic and sadistic components. Next, please. Parenthetically and importantly, my interest is not specifically in how sadomasochism gets played out in the sexual arena. I don't know much about that. I'm not all that interested in that. That's not what this is about. Rather, I conceive of sadomasochism as a dysfunctional relational dynamic that will get played out to a greater or lesser degree in most of the relentless patient's significant relationships. Next, the patient's relentless hope, which fuels her masochism, is the stance to which she desperately clings in order to avoid, see, the defense, confronting intolerably painful realities about the object and its immutability. And her relentless outrage, which fuels her sadism, is the stance to which she resorts in those moments of dawning recognition that the object is separate and cannot be forced to be something it isn't. Next, the masochistic defense of relentless hope and the sadistic defense of relentless outrage always go hand in hand, although again, one or the other may well be repressed, unconsciously repressed, or maybe consciously suppressed, or you can be in denial. And both speak to the patient's refusal to confront the truth about the bad, immutable object. Next, please. More specifically, masochism is a story. So if you say to a patient, a masochistic patient, you enjoy suffering, sort of, oh, no, I think you're so missing the point there, at least according to the way I conceptualize it. Masochism is a story about the patient's hope, her relentless hope, her hoping against hope that perhaps someday, somehow, some way, were she to be but good enough, try hard enough, be persuasive enough, persist long enough, suffer deeply enough, or be masochistic enough, she might yet be able to extract from the object sometimes the parent herself, sometimes a stand-in for the parent, sometimes the therapist, sometimes a life partner, sometimes the child, whatever. The recognition and love denied her as a child. In other words, she might yet be able to compel the immutable object to relent next. And so, even in the face of incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, the patient will pursue the object of her desire with a vengeance. The intensity of this relentless pursuit, fueled by her entitled conviction that the object could give it, were the object but willing, and there's some truth in that, should give it, because that is the patient's due, perhaps less truth in that, and would give it, were she, the patient, but able to get it right. The patient's investment is not so much in the suffering per se, but rather it's in her willingness to suffer because of her passionate hope that perhaps each next time, next please, perhaps each next time, ... Sadism is then the relentless patient's reaction to the loss of hope she experiences in those moments of dawning recognition that she's not actually going to get what she had so desperately wanted and felt she needed to have in order to go on. In those moments of anguished heartbreak and outrage, when she's confronted head on with the inescapable reality of the object's separateness and refusal to relent. Next, please. Now, the healthy response to the loss of hope is to confront the pain of one's disappointment. And we're going to try to help the patient to do this. But anyway, this is before the patient has sort of come our way, and we've had an opportunity to facilitate their grieving with disillusionment statements, which is what we're going to get to. So the healthy response to the loss of hope is to confront the pain of one's disappointment, grieve the loss of one's illusions about the object, and, in the words of self-psychology, adaptively, not defensively introject bad, but adaptively internalize. These are called transmitting internalizations in self-psychology, whatever good there was in the relationship. A growth-promoting process, grieving is a growth-promoting process described in self-psychology as transmuting, meaning in essence, structure building, capacity enhancing, internalization. But the relentless patient does something else. Thank you. Next. With the dawning recognition that the object can be neither possessed and controlled, nor made over into what she would want it to be, the relentless patient will react, whether in actual fact or simply in fantasy, with the sadistic unleashing of a torrent of abuse directed either towards herself for having failed to get what she had so desperately wanted, or towards the disappointing object for having failed to provide it. She will then alternate between enraged protests at her own inadequacy and scathing reproaches against the object for having thwarted her desire. In essence, sadism is the relentless patient's reaction to the loss of hope. Next. In any event, the sadomasochistic cycle will be repeated once the seductive object throws the patient a few crumbs. The patient, ever hungry for such morsels, will become once again hooked and revert to her original stance of suffering, sacrifice, and surrender in a repeat attempt to get what she so desperately wants and feels she must have. Next, please, and then next. So a clinical moment. So if during a therapy session, the patient suddenly becomes abusive, what question might her therapist think to pose? Well, were the therapist to ask, how do you feel that I have failed you? At least she will have known enough to ask the question. But she will also thereby be indirectly suggesting that the answer will be primarily a story about the patient and the patient's distorted perception of having been failed. How do you feel that I have failed you? It is better, therefore, that the therapist ask, how have I failed you. Next, please. Now she will be signaling her recognition of the fact that she herself might well have contributed to the patient's experience of disillusionment and heartache. And over time, I personally, over the decades of my practicing, have come to believe in the power of co-creation. Everything is co-created. Failures, successes, everything is co-created. And now my patients are always saying, well, I know it's co-created. And I think it is. It's a very intersubjective approach. It's the intersubjective approach of contemporary relational theory, but it applies across the board. So the therapist might have contributed, perhaps by not fulfilling an implicit promise earlier made, or by refusing to acknowledge her unrelenting commitment to a certain perspective. Oh, we don't do that, but whatever. Or by failing to admit to an error in judgment, or by denying her mistiming of an interpretation. Indeed, the therapist must have both the wisdom to recognize and the integrity to acknowledge, certainly to herself, and perhaps to the patient as well, the part she herself might have played in the drama being reenacted between them. Next, please, and then next. All right. Optimally stressful disillusionment statements. Here we go. To facilitate the necessary grieving of disappointments. Okay. 3 parts. You had so hoped that, ... but you're beginning to realize that, ... and it devastates, enrages you. Now, let me break that down. The therapeutic goal is to create galvanizing tension between the defensive need, right, it's a defense, for relentless hope, and the adaptive capacity, which is the healthier something, to confront, grieve, and ultimately evolve to a place of acceptance through healing cycles of disruption and repair. So first, you highlight what had been the patient's illusion. Now, let me say, if the patient isn't ready for this, then they're not ready for it, and therefore you're not going to do this. And in a moment, I'm going to talk to you about grievance statements that have to do with when the patient isn't quite there yet. But if we think that the patient is beginning to sort of get it, that maybe it's not going to happen what she had been wanting. And please hear the distinction between not you were hoping that. I want it to be you had hoped that, meaning something prior to this moment in time. You see, rather, we were hoping is a little too vague about the time frame. You had, so it's a pluperfect or past perfect. I learned that in 11th grade. Yes, thank you, Hilaria, for nodding on that. Okay, so first highlight what had been the patient's illusion. In other words, her defensive need for relentless hope. Then highlight the reality of the patient's disillusionment. So the defensive need, they'll when you highlight and name the defensive need, patients, I had thought, I had hoped that you would answer my questions. I had hoped my mother would eventually apologize. And they grant that, yeah, okay. It eases their anxiety. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Now, adaptive capacity. Now you're appealing to the healthier part of them that's going to make them more anxious, but you're doing both. You're both easing their anxiety and then increasing it, easing, increasing. And you do this repeatedly. As often as they're busy being relentlessly hopeful, which is for quite some time, then you get to be, when the moment is right, judiciously and repeatedly offering these optimally stressful, growth incentivizing disillusionment statements that actually create mismatch experiences, growth incentivizing, growth promoting mismatch experiences that will juxtapose defensive need and adaptive capacity. All right, that's a little beyond what we need to know here, but whatever. Okay, so first highlight what had been the patient's illusion, then highlight the reality of the patient's disillusionment. In other words, their adaptive capacity to confront. I'm going to give you an example in a moment. And finally, resonate empathically with the pain of the patient's grief. Her adaptive capacity to feel the actual heartbreak and anger. It's not just the sad part, it's the angry part too. Next, please. So here are some examples. You had so hoped that we could have a personal relationship, but you're coming to realize, albeit reluctantly, that a therapy relationship is not really about friendship per se, and that breaks your heart. Now, you're going to say this over and over and over again, changing the words around a little bit, but to facilitate their grieving of their disillusionment, the loss of their relentless hope, their illusions about the way the world should be, as a corrective for the way their experience of the world early on. You had so hoped that your mother would apologize, but you're beginning to accept that she simply does not hold herself accountable, which is both enraging and devastating. Although you knew it would take time, you had hoped that you would be feeling better after these several weeks of therapy. It really upsets you that you are still feeling such despair. You had been hoping that I would not make the same kinds of mistakes that everyone else in your life has, which is why it is so very upsetting that I too have now let you down. All right, well, let's move on. There's some more here. Let's see, next page, please. Okay, and some more. Let's see here, we'll do one. Yeah, okay. In those moments, the bottom one, when you let yourself remember just how limited your father is and just how defensive he becomes whenever you try to hold him accountable, it feels totally overwhelming and hurts so much. You had so hoped that you could get him to take at least some responsibility for his abusiveness. So you can switch around the order, but basically you're highlighting what they had been hoping. Then you name the reality of their disillusionment. They're beginning to get it, that their mother doesn't apologize. Now, how is it that they know that? Well, they've been living with their mother for 40 years and their mother has never apologized. So they get to say, you're beginning to get it, that your mother probably really won't. I throw in a lot of qualifiers, probably, really won't be able or willing or to hold herself accountable. You're beginning to get that. And now you resonate empathically with the pain and the anger of their grief. Next page, please. Good, just some more. Next page, please. Okay, so now the two kinds. So one is if you try to do it tomorrow with a patient or whatever, you may find yourself feeling like, oh my God, this so doesn't work. So there are grievance statements for patients who are still clinging to their defensive need to avoid grieving, that is, the refusal to grieve, the reality of the object's disillusionment of them. So instead of confronting and grieving that painful reality, they are filled with grievances. Grievances are unmourned disappointments. Grievances against the object and relentless self-righteous outrage. So here's one, and then I'll do a grieving statement. You had so hoped that your mother would eventually apologize, but you're beginning to realize that probably she never will. So that sounds like a disillusionment state, three parts. These are the first two. And the injustice of her refusal to apologize fills you with outrage. This is not a woman who's beginning to confront and grieve the reality of the mother's refusal to hold herself accountable. So grieving statements, on the other hand, basically disillusionment statements, the ones that are going to work, are for patients who have advanced to the stage where they have, some part of them anyway, has the adaptive capacity to confront and grieve the reality of the object's disillusionment of them. You had so hoped that your mother would eventually apologize, but you're beginning to realize that probably she never will. That's the same as the grievance statement. And that realization absolutely devastates you, angers you, and breaks your heart. Next, please. Okay, and then after that as well. So grieving, what is it really? Genuine grieving requires of us, my eyes on the time, that at least for periods of time, we be, some people say, well, what is grieving? Fully present with the anguish of our grief, the pain of our regret, the intensity of the rage we experience when confronted with sobering realities about ourselves, our relationships, and our world. We must not absent ourselves from our grief. We must enter into it and embrace it in an embodied fashion. We cannot effectively grieve when we are dissociated, missing in action, or fleeing the scene. So we need to create a safe enough space with empathic attunement, empathic resonance, that the patient can dare to be more embodied in her experiencing of the grieving. We need to be engaged in the moment, embodied, mindful of all that is going on inside of us, grounded, focused, and in the here and now. If we are in denial, shut down, closed, numb, refusing to feel, or protesting the unfairness, grievances of it all, then no real grieving can be done. Next, please. Your grief can mend your broken heart. Grieving is nature's way of healing a broken heart. A lot of people have said that. Next, please, and then next. Okay, if all goes well, it will be within the context of safety provided by the relationship with her therapist that the patient will be able at last, through healing cycles, to feel the pain against which she has spent a lifetime defending herself. Defending herself by way of the relentless hope, hoping against hope that maybe someday, somehow, some way. In the process, gradually, it's incrementally transforming step by step, both her relentless need to possess and control, and when thwarted, her retaliatory need to punish and destroy, into the adaptive capacity to relent, to grieve, to accept, to forgive, on some level to forgive. Question becomes, if it's really that bad, you have to forgive. Let me put for now, to forgive, to internalize what good there was, to separate, to let go, and to move on. Ultimately evolving to a place of appreciation and gratitude for all the good that was and is next. So, from relentless pursuit of the unattainable to sober, mature acceptance of the reality that it was what it was and is what it is. Acceptance is a simple recognition of the truth that this is the way things are in this moment. Next, please. C.S. Lewis. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And I talk a lot about how patients position themselves in relation to traumas and position themselves in relation to the choices that they really do have. And then also how we position ourselves in relation to the patient and the choices we have in terms of how we react defensively or respond adaptively. Next, please. Harold Searles has suggested that realistic hope arises in the context of surviving disappointment. Next, please, and then next. Conclusion. At the end of the day, a patient who's caught up in the throes of needing her objects to be other than who they are must be given the opportunity to confront and grieve the excruciatingly painful reality that no one will ever be for her the good parent for whom she has spent a lifetime searching, the good parent she should have had early on, but never consistently and reliably did. Next, please. The bad news will be the sadness the patient experiences as she begins to accept the sobering reality that disappointment is an inevitable and necessary aspect of relationship. The good news, however, will be the wisdom she acquires as she comes to appreciate ever more profoundly the subtleties and nuances of relationship and begins to make her peace with the harsh reality of life's many challenges. Sadder she will be, yes, but also wiser. Next, please. Sadder, but wiser. Next, please. We're getting very near the end. As a result of genuine grieving, grievances, unmourned disappointments, will have become transformed into the healthy capacity to accept the sobering reality that we cannot make the people in our world change, but that we can and must take ownership of and responsibility for all that we can change within ourselves. By the same token, that's autoplasty versus alloplasty. By the same token, we must come to terms with the sobering reality that we cannot change our history, but that we can and must change how we position ourselves in relation to it and how we position ourselves in our lives going forward. Next, please. A Japanese saying, true happiness is not about getting what you want, but coming to want and appreciate what you have. Next, please. I'm here reminded, this is the last slide, I'm here reminded of the New Yorker cartoon in which a gentleman seated in a restaurant by the name of the Disillusionment Cafe is awaiting the arrival of his order. The waiter returns to his table and announces, your order is not ready and nor will it ever be. Next, please. Yeah, next. And then next, there are the references. Next, thank you. And next, finally, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, please email me at my website is. All right. So we have like 2 minutes or so, but I would love for people to unmute themselves, say anything, tell me anything, tell me a disillusionment statement, tell me a thought I would love to hear, please. And I guess we can get rid of, oh, thank you. I think somebody, thank you, Libby. I think we can get rid of those slides. And now can I be, okay, good. So any questions, like raise your hand or just say something before I call on you, because I do know some of you. Libby, yes, Libby. Unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me. I was just wondering if you could say just a few words about what you find helpful to yourself in the midst of this kind of relentless and intense enactment with the patient that allows you to to stay centered in yourself and in your experience?
Oh, that's a great question, Libby. And even as they're beating on you with their relentless hope, it's sadistic. So the really masochism and sadism go hand in hand. And first of all, one does recognize that as the therapist, one is tempted to, and sometimes indeed does, participate in a sort of sadomaso playing of something out with the patient, which, by the way, is not the worst thing in the world. Technically, that's not going to be ultimately the thing that's going to heal. But if indeed, as part of a projective identification, and they're ever busy beating on you, and I know you this, and I know you that, blah, 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 if indeed we find ourselves sometimes reacting defensively, less healthy, instead of responding adaptively, sort of like whatever, that is, of course, a mutual enactment. That's a transference, countertransference entanglement. And that's sort of what happens in an intersubjective, co-created therapy experience. With that said, for me, one, I'm knowing that at this stage in my career anyway, nobody's watching from behind a one-way mirror. So, so that gives me a little more freedom to sort of really engage. But also, so what enables me? I would say, one, giving myself permission to sort of do something back a little bit, but also to get it that on some level, if it's being played out with me, which this example you're giving is, then I'm getting that on some level I have failed them. I have not delivered in the way that they would have wanted, even if indeed the panel of 10,000 judges is going to say, of course, you're not really going to hug them. So it's a fine line between getting named what they really would have wished and then doing some grievance statements, and then ultimately some grieving statements. When we get it, we direct them back. Ultimately, they get back to the early on experience of the errors of omission and the neglect and absence, deprivation and neglect that they had, and the fact that they're now in their relationship with me. I'll often generalize it. So not only in their relationship with their partner, their relationship with their boss, and not surprisingly with me too, they find themselves just needing. So I like to generalize to highlight that sort of like, yeah, it's a story about me and that there's something I'm not doing, but also it's really also a story about them. They're the common denominator. And so I'll say something like, as we step back, we're realizing that I too am now letting you down in the way that your mother had and in the way that your partner does, as a sort of temporary sort of getting myself off the hot seat, but then coming back to me, and they would so have wished that I would answer because they feel they've been so alone their whole lives. So I need to come to understand why it is that they would so want an answer, would so want a hug, would so want a personal relationship. So for me, truly to be able to enter empathically enough into their experience that I come to understand why it is that they are so relentless, what it is that they do really want, so that we can probably hearken back to the early on formative traumatic life experience, and so on. So thank you. And thank you, Valeria. I see that. Thank you, Libby. So another question, please. I need and want another question, not to be relentless, but I do need and want another question. I'm going to start calling on you if we're not careful here. All right. So a few people are signing off. Let's see. Well, I mean, oh, look, they're just signing off. I mean, I know it is sort of our stopping time. Let's see. Well, all right. Well, I guess that's it. So do you feel that this is helpful and that you'll know a little bit better when you're talking sadomaso? Some of my patients now acknowledge that they can get caught up in a sadomaso, and they call it sadomaso, the relatedness when they're not getting what they want and feel desperately that they need to have in order to go on. So there you go. All right. Well, listen, folks, it is good. Oh, Lori, thank you. Very clear. And oh, good. Let me see what else that was. Very clear and something else. I found you being both hopeful and terrifying. Yes, hopeful and terrifying. Very good. Two parts, both end. Wish me luck. Good luck to you, Lori. I'm facilitating a group at 6 p.m. Bye-bye. So unfortunately, need to run. Got it. Thank you. This was very clear and helpful. Oh, good. Oh, that was Valeria. Oh, Valeria had said that. Yes. And then Lori. Okay. All right. All right, you all. And Peter, thank you. I think Peter was waving at me and so on. And is Sarah the one there? Sarah's there. Yeah. Oh, yes, you.
Great.
Oh, yeah, there you are. There you are. All right. Bye-bye, you all. Thank you. I'll be offering some more of these. So, please sign up. It's like free. Right. And a clapping. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And Marianne, thank you so much for making this happen. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Martha.